Working with Viewports. Hi, Joe Cerrone.
Dale Rosen.
Today we're going to talk about Module 5 and working with Viewports. And so here's our completed exercise. And what it shows is these 5 conference rooms. And what we wanted to talk about was Viewports and how to work with Viewports. Essentially, Paperspace is geared towards the printed paper output. And so everybody still works with paper, whether we print it out or whether we have it as a PDF, personal document file. And so AutoCAD does a very good job of being able to display things on paper. One of the ways they do that is with what's called Paperspace. And with Paperspace, what we do is we set up the paper with the title block, and then we put a viewport on it. So if I go to this second page here, which has no viewports on it, we can kind of look at how viewports work. So here's my title block. It's an 11 by 17 or 17 by 11 title block, which means when I print it out, that's the size of the paper. And if we go back to traditional drafting, we used to use scales to be able to measure things. And the idea is that we can go down to the facilities department with a blueprint and our rulers and see if all the furniture will fit through the door. A typical application, but anybody who works in facilities will know sometimes people goof it up. So in model space, what we have here is we have our different conference rooms. And we could say that, you know, this could be like classrooms. We could have different classrooms at the college that we manage and that we want to manage the technology that's in them. So what we did was we laid out each one of them and we just put them in model space. There are other ways to do that with external referencing where you can draw existing drawings and put them into a master drawing as well, which is more efficient. But from a standpoint of just working with viewports, what we did is we have all these objects laid out in model space. And then in Paperspace, we have our title block. And what we typically do is we'll make a viewport layer. I'm going to turn it on so that we can see it. And you can see that by default, there is one viewport. If I right click on that and I look at the quick properties, it'll tell me that it is a viewport. And we can do a number of different things. First off, just from working with a viewport, you can double click in it. And what that'll do is it'll run the M space or floating model space command. And so floating model space is a window to model space. And then what you can do is you can go to view, zoom, all, and we can see all of our geometry in model space. We can also then set the scale by bringing the object that we want to display to the center of the viewport and then going down to the viewport scaling, and we can then go and see what scale works most appropriately. And so I've got 1/4 of an inch equals a foot, and that looks terrific. So I'm going to lock that viewport. And then if I were to print this out, the way that we print things is that printers are tied to the plotters. So as we work with this, when you plot from Paperspace, we would say File, Plot. It has batch plotting, which means that it will allow you to plot like a book. You can tag a bunch of different layouts and plot them all at once. And so if you had a meeting with your facilities guys and you wanted to do a wing of the building or talk about the furniture plans for, let's say, a computer wing, you could print out all the rooms in that wing and then go through what's supposed to be in those rooms. So that's what batch plotting is. We're just going to continue to plot on a single sheet. And then it warns me because the last time I used this drawing, it was tied to the printer in P134, which is an HP plotter. And so it's looking for that and it doesn't find it. So when we plot things, what we want to do is we want to go here and we want to set up the plotter that we have. Now, if I go back and I use my P34 plotter, which is one of the rooms in Skokie, it pulls this Xerox laser printer, and then it allows me to choose the paper size based on the paper sizes that that plotter supports. So that plotter will support these paper sizes. And I can go in here and I can look and see if I have a larger paper size, and I don't. I only have 8.5 by 11. So I would not be able to print this at scale to this plotter, but not to worry, because I have another printer here in that room, which is an HP DesignJet. And most of your people who do CAD or facilities or interior design work will have a large printer. And so this one has all the print sizes. And so as I go through and set up the printout, what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a B size print or an 11 by 17. So I can take an architectural B size landscape, and then it will tie that to the printer. And then it will give me the options for setting up the scale. Now, when we print from Paperspace, we choose layout and 1:1, and it will scale the viewport 1/4 inch equals a foot. So this plotting scale is just purely for the paper size. And then the viewports that are scaled, you need to designate those with something in written text. If I preview it, it'll show me that paper and where that's at. I'm going to exit. Didn't quite work out the way I wanted it to. And I'm surprised, because this should fit on the paper. And so let's go and see if it's that oversized thing. Let's see if I can just dial in 11 by 17. Let's preview this one. There we go. And so you can see it fits on the paper. Now, everybody who is sort of like I am, you know, it's like, oh, it's not perfectly in the center. All right, well, we do want that perfectly in the center. So we'll exit this, and then we'll say we want it to fit or center the plot, but it won't let me do that with layouts. So what I have to do is I have to switch it to extents, which means whatever is in Paperspace, it will plot. So if I have something off the screen 10 inches away, it will compress that and fit it all in. But with extents, I can center the plot, and I still leave it at 1:1, and I can preview it. And now it will print centered in the plot. Just tips and tricks. Again, you want to have these little details that call out the actual plot size. And then if I plot it, I'm going to exit it. I'm going to plot it to a PDF. If I wanted to change this to a PDF, I can do that as well. And so I can say AutoCAD PDF. We'll go with this high. I like the Adobe ones. Let's see if I can find that one.
Up on top, Joe.
Thanks, Al. And then if I preview it, right click and plot it. Now I can send this drawing to somebody. It's always something. Anyway, click here to view and plot the details. So it blew it up, didn't work. Try it again. And again, I have to start all over again. This time I'll set it up for a PDF. I'm going to use this one this time. We'll just do a general document PDF. And we'll say extents, center, preview. Right click, plot. And here it wants to know where to put that. And so I'll just throw it on my desktop and I'll save it. And then here's my plot. So this is one way to plot things. And as we're talking about Paperspace and model space, that's one aspect. You can also work with plot styles, colors, and all kinds of things, because people are exceptionally picky about colors in this field. And so if you work for a company, I used to work for a company that had a specific green that was part of their logo, and they wanted it signode green. And so it wasn't enough to, it couldn't be this color green. It would have to be kind of a forest green. Anyway, continuing on with viewports. So let's spend a little bit more time and look at what else we can do with viewports. I'm going to delete this viewport out. And then I'm going to go and I'm going to run the viewport command. And so I'm going to say view viewports, and I'm going to say 4 viewports. And what I can then do is I can go in and I can make a rectangle. And then what that will do is it will create the 4 viewports. And then I can click in each viewport and set the scale for each one of those. And so I'll set this one at 1/4 of an inch equals a foot. Of course, now that they're smaller, I'm going to have to dial it down to 1/8 of an inch equals a foot. Great. Do the same thing here. And let's go and grab a different one. And then here. And then here. And then be sure to note on the paper space that you have 1/8 of an inch equals a foot for each of these. And this one wouldn't be elevation. I would update that and I would change it from the word elevation.
Highlight it on the bottom, Joe.
Thanks, Al.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because this is done with an attribute. And we'll talk about what attributes do. Essentially, attributes are tags that are tied to geometry. Okay, and so this is one thing that we can do. Another thing we can do with our layer properties when we start to work with these viewports is that we can, see if I can find my menu bar for layers. It's blocks, layer properties. There it is. Not a big fan of these floating toolbars with tool monitors as they disappear on me. So here's my viewport command. And what I also wanted to talk about was, one, I can change the color of it. And so if I change the color of it to red, and then I close that, or at least try to get it off the screen, you can see that the viewports are red. Another thing that I can do with the viewports is I can just turn the layer off, and then the objects appear to hover in space. This is another nice technique. Another thing that I can do is, I'm going to turn the viewports back on, is I can do something called viewport layering. And so viewport layering will allow me to toggle on and off certain layers within the viewport. And this is what's really nice, especially with interior design, because I can go into this viewport and then I can check to see what layer my furniture is on. Now, unfortunately, it's on layer 0 in all of these instead of layer furniture. And so if I click on them, it's on layer 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and see if I have a furniture layer, and I don't. So I'm going to go and make a furniture layer. And then I'm going to make that just a different shade of blue, a little darker blue. And then I'm going to just leave that on. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these objects on that layer. And so double click outside here, zoom in, double click inside. I'm working in floating model space. And now I'm going to put the furniture on the furniture layer. I'll put the projector too. And so I'll go up here after it's highlighted and I'll put it on the furniture layer. And so now that furniture should be on the furniture layer. So it's on the furniture layer. I can also see that it's still light blue. So what that means is that that furniture was created with an override in the properties, and it should be by layer. So I'm going to set it as by layer. And now you can see that the furniture has the correct color. Getting back to the point of viewport layering now. So as I back out of the viewport, what I can do here is I can disable or turn off the furniture layer in that current viewport. And so I'll turn that off. I wasn't in the layer, so it didn't do it. Now it will. And you can see that now the furniture has disappeared. And I missed a little of the geometry, so I'm just going to put that on the right layer. And then I can go into the next one. And so that's a very good tool to use. We can go in here. We can then set up and I should have locked the viewport layer. Let me go back and set that up at 1/8 of an inch equals a foot. And I'll lock that. When it's locked, it's not going to change scales when you're working in floating viewports. I always think of this as like a doctor working on surgery through through a cloth, that just lets him see what he has to work on. And so I can go and I can put these other furniture blocks on the furniture layer. And then we can disable and enable the viewport layering within there. Another thing that we can do is that we can also create different shape viewports. And so as we work on this, what I could do is I could go, I'm on the viewport layer, and let's say I wanted to do something kind of stylish. I want to put a circle right here like that. And then I want to offset that. Let's just say 0.25 like that. And then what I can do is I can create viewports out of objects. And so what I'll do is I'll come in here and I'll explode these viewports, which will unviewport them. Maybe not. I guess I can't. Never mind. I'll just erase them. There we go. And then if I wanted to create a square to be used as a viewport, I can do that. And then what I like to do is I like to make it look nice, where I'll mirror it. And then I'll do that same thing again, where I'll mirror these two. And then what I'll do is I'll explode them and trim them. And so I'll trim these. I need more coffee to do this sometimes. All right, so that's a shape, this is a shape, this is a shape, and this is a shape. And then I'll delete out this geometry right here. And then I'll turn these into viewports. Now, to make an object into a viewport, what you do is you say view, viewport, object. And then what you can do is you can turn a closed polyline or a circle into a viewport. And so now this is a viewport. Now these I can't turn into viewports because they're individual lines. So what do I have to do to these, Al, to be able to make them into viewports?
Well, you're gonna region them, you can boundary them,
So regional,
Yes.
let's try that. So if
or
we
power line them.
region, so region them or polyline them. And what that'll do is it'll turn it into a closed shape. And so there, that is now a region. And then what I can do is I can say view, viewport, object. And now this is a viewport, and we can get a little bit fancy on it now. And so I'll come in here and I'll just put this, and then I'll dial in the scale. And we'll do the same thing for the other ones. This time we'll use pedit. This is the old fashioned commands. I still like them. Turn it into a polyline, yes, join. And then I'll join these other lines, because we all know that people that are designers want a certain look about their drawings. I'm going to do the same thing to the other two viewports just to be quick. I'm going to use region. I think it's quicker. I have a couple less buttons to push. And I'll repeat that command by hitting enter. And then we can just turn these into viewports by saying view, viewport, object, and then we can turn these other ones. Double click, dial in the scale, lock it, always try to lock your viewports, because otherwise what will happen is somebody will use it and they'll use the zoom command and then they'll change the scale. Double click, go into floating model space, put the viewport centered, dial in the scale, and then lock it. Again, view, viewport, object, select the polygon object, double click in the viewport, queue up what you want in the viewport. Let's just go with this one. Dial in the scale, lock it, and then we'll print it. And so when we're ready to print it, we're going to go File, Plot. We'll print it on a single sheet. It remembers my last plotter. I'll dial in my plotter to it. And so I'm going to just print this on a PDF. And then what I'll do is I'll set it up as extents, center the plot, leave the scale at 1:1. And then if you apply it to layout, it will remember it every time you print it. And so I usually will say preview it. If it looks good, then I'll right click, I'll exit. I'll apply it to the layout and then I'll okay it. And now it wants to know what the name of it is. I'll call it 1, 2, 3 on my desktop. And it will generate that as a PDF. And then I can send this to somebody who doesn't have AutoCAD. It looks a little wonky with the colors, but I think when you zoom in on it, it gets a little better. I'm not sure why they're washing out like that. That'll be one for the Adobe people. All right, so that's a quick rundown on how to work with viewports and how to work with plots. I'm going to end this recording and then we're going to continue on to the next thing.